So from the Greeks, we've got this notion of our being a detached self. We can be critical, we can be reflective, we can be rational, we can be objective. But that doesn't determine at all who you are. In fact, it sort of wipes you out. So that because in ethics you do what everybody does, the rational thing, you contemplate these rational patterns, you merge with the rational patterns of the universe, and there isn't any you. There's something, any individual you. There is this thinking you. But then there is the Judeo-Christian tradition, and now we have to talk about that in the same categories that we talked about the Greeks. And the existentialists are on the side of the Judeo-Christian tradition. They're critical of this whole Greek view. They might even be distorting it, but I don't think so. I'm enough of an existentialist to think that what I just told you is an accurate description of the amazing power that to think and be objective that we've invented qua Greeks, that the Greeks invented and we've inherited. But there is this other tradition now. They don't divide things up into the epistemological and morality and metaphysics. They're too busy acting, running around doing things in history to have this kind of philosophical study. But you can sort of ask yourself anyway, what are the Hebrews saying about truth? That's the epistemology one first. Well, it's a very different notion of truth. Truth is not this objective getting true beliefs that correspond to the way the world is. Truth is being true to somebody, and particularly in this religious aspect, being true to God. That we have this expression still. Are you being true to him? Are you being true to her? Are you being true to yourself? And we still have, for those who are in this tradition, particularly here the Hebrews, that there is a sense of being true to God. That is, God asks that the Hebrews have a total commitment to him, and he makes a covenant with them that he will watch over them if they obey and are devoted to him. And that's a kind of truth. It's not a detached contemplation kind of truth. It's I just wondered, is this turned on? David, did we turn it on? Okay. Instead of a detached contemplation kind of truth, it's a total commitment kind of truth. To be true to God is to keep the covenant. And that's the highest form of truth there is. That makes, you can see all sorts of differences. For Greeks, the truth is open to all the people because every human being has a universal, rational, theoretical capacity. And if you teach them, any people, Greek, then they can also, say, do geometry. There's a dialogue, the Meno, where Socrates teaches a slave boy who doesn't have any philosophical education step by step to prove the Pythagorean theorem. That's a very different way of looking at the people who are not automatically in your group. For the Hebrews, since truth is revealed by God as this request, this demand to be true to him, it's revealed at a certain time and a certain place, and then it's written down in the Torah and preserved in the tradition. So truth is not universal and timeless like it is for the Greeks. It's local and historical for this particular people at this particular time who got this particular message. So how do you deal with outsiders? Well, like in the Meno, you can teach them Greek and teach them math and integrate them into this theoretical world of thinking. But when the Hebrews deal with outsiders, they don't try to, or particularly the early ones. I mean, the Hebrew, don't write me email as I get from the podcast people and people in office hours telling me that after all, the Judaism and the Ten Commandments is for everybody and so forth. eventually it got that way. But I'm talking about at the beginning. At the beginning it wasn't for everybody. There were the Hebrews with their covenant, and everybody else was idol worshippers. And with idol worshippers, you just ignore them, or if they get in the way, you kill them. But what you don't do is convert them. That would be that because the covenant wasn't made with them. By the way, stop me if you think that you disagree or that you don't understand. And so the ultimate authority. And wait a minute. I want to make. Yeah. Now we're in morality. I've just finished truth, and now the next one is morality. There, the ultimate authority is God, not reason, and you can see it if you look at the Euthyphro. I did mention the Euthyphro already. Am I repeating myself at all? Why did I mention the Euthyphro already? Maybe I didn't. And did I? Yeah, why did I? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to mention the Euthyphro again. I don't think I said this, that in the Euthyphro, Socrates is trying to tell Euthyphro what the right thing to do is, or help Euthyphro figure it out. Because Euthyphro, I think I did say this, has to decide whether to turn in his father, who's killed a slave, or left him to die in a ditch, really, or not. But Socrates is trying to find common ground so that he can reason with Euthyphro about what he ought to do. And that turns out to be hard. So he does find it by asking Euthyphro, is an action good because the gods love it, or do the gods love it because it's good? The actual phrase, if you go look it up, is he says, is it good because the gods, because it's pious, or is it pious because the gods approve? That I just put it, and I keep it in my way because that's a more normal way to put it. So the question is, if you're going to do something, and in this case, turning your father or not, the question is the right thing to do what the gods approve of, or is there some independent way of finding out what is the right thing to do, and then everybody who's rational, including the gods, will approve of it? What do you think? Is an action pious because the gods love it, and approve of it, or do the gods love it and approve of it because it's pious, because it's good? Now we're asking for not your opinion, but Euthyphro's opinion. If you're a Greek, what do you say? You what? Yeah, she says in Greco-Roman mythology the gods were largely immoral. And that's true, but what we're hearing is Socrates doesn't like mythology, and he doesn't like the gods, and he's trying to, in fact, that's what he gets in trouble for. Socrates finally gets tried by the Athenians for inventing new gods, which the new god, I think, is rationality, and he thinks that mythology is exactly, and tradition is exactly not right. So, and insofar as these gods behave in this immoral way, you just have to not count them. If there's some rational right thing to do, which they hadn't figured out yet with Euthyphro, but there is something right to do. You either have to turn in your father or not. And it's a complicated case because there are duties on both sides and so forth. But whatever the right rational ethical answer is, Euthyphro has to obey it, or else he's doing bad things, and the gods obey it because it's the right thing to do. Now the interesting thing in getting ready for reading Kierkegaard is to ask the Hebrew story. Is an action good because the gods approve it, command it, require it, or is it required because it's good? And moreover, he's absolutely right. What is good is what God declares to be good, and he declares it not in general, which would make it more back to the Greeks, but for each person in each situation. It's whatever God requires of them that is the right thing to do. Now, if you're going to push that to an extreme, what would you say? Let's find a case in which it is really clear that something is good if God requires it, no matter what you might normally and ethically and rationally think about it. It doesn't matter. It's what God demands. What would be the extremist case in the Bible of that? Yes, Abraham sacrificing Isaac on the front of your book. Exactly. There it is. God says, kill your son, and it becomes the right thing for Abraham to do. And he will show his faith and be admired as the father of the faith if he does succeed in killing his son. Now, Kierkegaard's got lots of worries about that. How's that going to look to Sarah and to the rest of everybody else? And we'll have to talk about that. Those are what's called the problems, where Kierkegaard goes through problem 1 and 2 and so forth. But the answer, the problems arise because they all agree that if God commands it, it's the right thing to do, no matter what it seems to normal, rational people just watching what's going on. And what God commands is different for every person. Everybody has their own calling. Everybody has their own situation, and everyone is trying to do what God requires of them in that. And that means God's command to kill Abraham, and that's sort of what you weren't quite clear about. It isn't God's requirement to kill Abraham. To kill Isaac, it isn't something like a statement about what's good in general is up to God. It's that what counts as good in each particular situation is up to God. It doesn't, when God tells Abraham to kill Isaac, he doesn't mean that if you're a good, pious father, you should kill your son. That all good fathers should kill their sons. It just says, Abraham, that the thing your duty is to do is to kill your son. Okay, that's a pretty strange form of ethics, and it causes lots of problems, which Kierkegaard is happy to take on in the book. And finally, okay, now metaphysics, we're not going to get into that nearly so much as the truth issues and the what's right and wrong issues, but it's important to see the contrast. Remember, for the Greeks, the thing you want to do is contemplate the eternal, like in mathematics, or even the laws of science that don't change with time. Change is upsetting, and you can't have a theory if the universe is going to change its rules, or if you keep changing the rules. So time is a bother to be gotten out of. Well, not for the Hebrews. Time is where everything important happens. And for the Greeks, nothing important happens in time. Remember, the universe, I said, just recycles, and people just make it explicit in their lives, the sort of character that they have from the moment they're born. There is no change of any importance. And consider all the important things that happen in time. Well, first, it gets created. It's hard to know what it is to say that time, at a certain moment, time starts. But that's the view. It started 5,784 years ago, to be exact, according to the Hebrew calendar that is still counting. And that's when it all got created. Even if the dates are wrong, they don't believe in constant recycling. They believe that there was a moment in which the universe was created. As I said, I'm pretty sure last time, they would believe the Big Bang story, not the Big Crunch story, which the Greeks would believe. And, okay, first for that. And then there are other crucial moments. There's the covenant with God, which we talked about. Abraham gets this special relation. There's Moses, who at another time, particular date, in a particular place, gets the Ten Commandments. Then the most important thing happens. What it is exactly is a complicated story, which we aren't going to go into very much, but God becomes man and shows up at a particular place in history. That's the jargon for that is that's the incarnation. That's Jesus, who is God and who shows up as a particular person in a particular place, which is a scandal from the point of view of the Greeks, that the ultimate truth, the ultimate goodness, the ultimate everything is a particular being, a human being, who is also God and is in time. So that if God is eternal, Well, for the Greeks, and in a certain way for the Hebrews, then the eternal shows up at a particular moment for the Hebrews. That's what is the scandal for the Greeks. And how does it work in terms of individual people? Well, people can only, remember, develop their character, make explicit what's implicit. There was this thing called the human potential movement once upon a time in the 70s, which was trying to sort of bring out what's best in people. And you can't do anything more than bring out what's best in people, because there's no such thing as radical creation on that view. But the Hebrew view has, not only is the universe created, but people are subject to radical transformation. You know it under the description, being reborn. Being reborn is very different. A Christian concept of being reborn is not at all like bringing out your human potential, making explicit what's best in you. Kierkegaard says there's nothing good in you. That's what original sin is supposed to say and explain. You've got to be transformed into what Kierkegaard calls in our reading a new being. You become, if you were reborn, you become a new being, and that's radical transformation, not growth or realization or development. Okay, one more point, and that is also worlds are radically changed. I mean, it isn't as if you just go from the Greek world from the Homeric world to the Athenian Greek world to the Roman. Those are all, from the Greek point of view, continuous. I mean, they went on reading and reciting Homer, so to speak, through it all. But the way it looks to the Judeo-Christian is that a radically new world was created when God became man. So radically new that we got BC and AD. There's before Christ and after God. That's what those letters are short for. And that means there was a time before the world was changed, and that was the pagan world. And then there was the time that God came into the world, and then that was the Judeo-Christian world. And that is a radical transformation. It wasn't as if the saints were implicit and Jesus was implicit in the Roman world all along and it became explicit. It's just nothing like that was there, and then there it was.